How good are the Pats going to be this year, Tom? Come on, give it to me straight.
I knew you were going to go. You're going to dive straight into this.
Oh, Brockman is not.
I think that a lot is going to boil down to the Mac Jones, Bill O'Brien combination. How well those two work together, how good that offense fits what Mac Jones does. Obviously, he knows him and Bill didn't really overlap at Alabama, but there's a lot of concepts that are going to be familiar to Mac Jones. How those personalities mesh, because they are both strong personalities. They've both got tempers.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a really interesting dynamic. But I mean, let's be honest, last year, there really wasn't much of a plan on offense. It was just kind of slapped together. And Matt Patricia, everybody points the bullets at Matt Patricia. What do you want him to do? Bill Belichick made the decision. All right, well, I'm not going to hire an OC. We're just going to let Matt do it. Matt's from the defensive side. He's a really smart guy. But what are the odds that anybody's going to have success in that situation? So obviously, you saw what happened through the course of this offseason. Robert Kraft has his fingerprints on a lot of different things, including bringing back Bill O'Brien, including making sure they didn't lose Gerard Mayo, changing the dynamic a little bit, because Kraft, I would say by and large, does not get involved in football-specific decisions unless it's something that rises to the level of, for instance, the allegations against Antonio Brown before they released him. And obviously Kraft is going to have a heavy interest in things like that. But these are football decisions that Bill, for over 2 decades, has had mostly autonomy. Kraft's around a lot. He talks to him a lot, but that's Bill's thing. Kraft wanted to put his stamp on things this year. He's made very clear that it was a disappointment what happened last year. And so I think that those decisions are going to be a guiding force behind whatever happens with the Patriots this year. I still think that you look at the skill positions, and there's some questions about exactly how these things are going to fit together. Juju hasn't been out there during minicamp. We'll see how that evolves through the course of time. They got guys like Kendrick Bourne, who is really talented, has had productivity, but then there's whole games and stretches where he's virtually anonymous within the offense. They doubled down on the double tight end thing, bringing in Mike Gesicki. That could end up being a bargain type of a signing for them. We know that they've had a lot of success with tight ends in this specific offense here. And defensively, they're one of the best in the league last year. Keeping Mayo, obviously Bill's one of the best defensive minds in the game. In my mind, it's reductive, but this boils down to Bill O'Brien and Mac Jones. If that combination works well, and if you can get Mac, I don't want to say get his confidence back, but I think Mac, he talks about last season and what a disappointment it was. He got away from some things. He played through a lot. He had a really bad ankle that
bad. That happened on the last play of a game.
Many players would have gone and gotten surgery. He decided to gut it out. He didn't want to do surgery. He played through that the entire season. So you couple that with the scheme, with the different cooks that were in the kitchen last year, there were a lot of factors working against Mac Jones. This will give us a much better metric on what Mac Jones is. If he plays well, I think the Patriots could be a playoff team.
Why?
If he doesn't, I don't see it.
Why did Bill do that last year with the offense?
There's a lot of different
Are we ever
going
to find out the real answer why he decided to go with Joe Judge, failed head coach, definitely failed in New York, and then a defensive guy that was really bad at being a defensive coordinator on his way out, and then a really bad head coach in Detroit?
Well, I think Matt was a good defensive coordinator. I think that head coach and D coordinator are different skill sets.
The Eagles just scored again in the Super Bowl on him. 8,000 yards of offense in that game to a backup. So
I love when Fan Brockman comes out.
Not really a good
Not that this doesn't haunt him at night all the time.
Only Super Bowl I ever went to. Absolutely atrocious.
The mush.
I mean,
I could have.
In terms of why that happened, there were a bunch of different factors. But it became pretty obvious that if Bill wasn't going to get certain things that maybe he wanted, he was going to do what he's done in many other cases, which is just say he's going to move people around. These people can do it.
Was it just arrogance?
I mean, I don't want to say it's arrogance, but I mean, he's the most successful head coach in NFL history. He should have a high degree of confidence that he can pull off anything. In this particular case, it was, again, I think that the criticism of Matt is unfair to a degree, because take any defensive coordinator in the league, whether they're good or bad, and tell them you're now calling an offense. How often are those guys going to have success? Like, what D coordinator would you trust? You call Dan Quinn. Dan,
no, I wouldn't really trust any of them.
We need you to be the offensive coordinator.
I just think the point is, like, why was that the decision that was made last year?
Well, I mean, there's a process you have to go through if you're going to hire a coordinator. You got to do a bunch of interviews. You have to go outside your tree, where Bill very much wants to stay in the Patriots tree. I mean, how many times do we see it? Everybody they hire, or a lot of the people they hire, are back for a second time, at least to like the big time types of positions. They got some good young assistants on that team too, but a lot of the guys that they bring in, it's people from within the nest. Yeah. It's bringing back Josh. It's bringing back Matt. It's bringing back Joe. Now it's bringing back Bill. I mean, there's a long history of this. People get fired someplace else, and much like Nick Saban, who brings people back, people who are out of jobs. They may not even been former Alabama assistants, but they're people who are out of work. He wants to bring them in and have kind of a brain trust. Bill very much believes in the way that they do things. He believes in how they like to play. There's a certain style of football, even though they've definitely like melded to their personnel over the years. When they had Randy Moss in 2007, they had one of the greatest greatest regular seasons, period, in NFL history. They played a different style of offense than they were at the beginning of Tom Brady's career, 2000, 2001, in that era. And it's different than what they were playing toward the end of Brady's career, when they were still throwing it around a lot. But whether they had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, or whether they were relying on different types of players, they meld to that. Just like they are opponent-specific, they're game plan-specific in a lot of different things. But that entire mentality, there's a reason, quite frankly, that it hasn't worked a lot of other places, which is if you don't have Bill, if you don't have buy-in from everybody around him, because Bill has the pelts on the wall and can show all the Super Bowl rings, this is why we do things a certain way. It's hard to get organizational buy-in. It's hard to make people believe, okay, when Josh McDaniels goes to the Raiders last year and Dave Ziegler, two very intelligent guys, you have to kind of go through a process in which you're weeding out the people who are not on board, whether that's players, whether that's front office people, whatever else. It's hard to get everybody on the same page and to know you're probably going to go down before you go up, because you're changing the way everybody does things. And the Raiders had the additional challenge last year of the fact that they had made the playoffs the prior year, despite the complete clown show and all the horrible stuff that happened the previous year between Henry Ruggs and Damon Arnett and John Gruden. And somehow they patched it together and won a bunch of games with a guy who, by the following year was the Packers special teams coordinator. Right. So for them to then say, okay, we're going to move from some of these things. We're going to move on from certain players. Even now, moving on from Derek Carr, people say, why? It's you're trying to get people who are from the system. Who they bring in a quarterback? Jimmy Garoppolo. He's from within the system.
Brian Hoyer is the backup.
And Brian Hoyer is the backup. All of which is a long way of saying the mentality for Bill is very much, these are the guys who know the way that we want to do things. And that's not just scheme. That is how the building runs. It is the culture of it. It's the way that ego has to reside in certain areas within that organization. And obviously, in this particular case, he did something that was so far afield that even though, if any other coach had done it, people would have said this is moronic. When Bill did it, it was, this is really weird, but who knows? It's Bill. Right. Maybe it'll work out. And so I think bringing back Bill O'Brien, it's going to be a massive piece of what they try to do. Is that combination going to work? We'll find out.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.